Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about this migration wildness and craziness that is going on right now, and talk about some of the implications. This very much feels to me how it felt when 1093, 1196, and a number of other kingdoms very early on in Rise of Kingdoms, previously Rise of Civilizations history, were establishing themselves as super kingdoms, mega kingdoms, if you will, by just recruiting and hoarding as many players as possible and gaining absurd amounts of power, where you now see years later 1093 still is a powerhouse to be reckoned with. And I say all of this because it very much feels to me to a degree that COD could be going down this path. And I just want to talk about this, some of the pros and cons, and just kind of give you some of my thoughts. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up because it helps out a lot. So I want to get one thing that's been bugging me, though, out of the way, which is the fact that people have been using special immigration permits when this should not be possible. And I'm going to explain why. So I'm in 65 right now with my account. I haven't left. And if I go here into migration management and I see places remaining 1, however, I've seen this up to 3, and so I'm kind of assuming maybe everyone started at 3 and then they're working their way above that. I've seen some with 1, I've seen some with 2, I've seen some with 3, so I just wanted to, again, who knows if they've used it or not. I'm assuming so because I would just imagine maybe they started everyone at 3 and they've worked this down. So maybe these are accidental accepts, but I just want to be clear here. Right, this is open right now, so they haven't set anything. However, what is confusing me, if this is the case, if this is true, is that if you go, the way that this is supposed to work is that you can utilize a special immigration permit once your kingdom has used up either all of its remaining spaces available to you to bring people in, or your kingdom is full status. And I'm going to show this to you because it's listed here from an in-game mail that's titled Call of Dragons Migration Rules and FAQ. And it specifically says here under Special Migration for 2-B, when there are no available migration slots on a server or the server is full, you may submit a relocation application to that server's king if your application is approved. You must still spend the required migration permits to relocate. So, I don't know if this is a bug or if something is going on here, but I would be very curious to find out from people on if you have used any of your special immigration permits and your kingdom is not full status, or you've not used up all of your available slots. Have you asked COD CS? Have you asked VIP support? What is going on here? Because it makes no sense to me at all. And I'm hoping that we're just seeing some kind of visual bug, right? Or that I'm totally off on this and someone's going to be like, boss, you know what? No, it's okay. That's not what's really happening, right? This is what, and that would appease my heart, if you will. So now, let's get into this migration challenge. So what we're seeing right now, and I may have to give you a little bit of historical context here. The way that migration has worked, and what you're going to notice here, is that these kingdoms, which are essentially made up of some of the strongest kingdoms, alliances, and players in the game that reside in 1 through 90, is that a number of these kingdoms have been full status before. Specifically, if I show you one example here, and this is my kingdom health migration. This is the sheet that I use for the most active kingdoms in the game. And you'll see here that a number of these kingdoms are full. 24 is full. 5 has been full. And again, this data was pulled at the end of May, so this is a little more than a month old. But those have been full. 30 was full. 43 was full. Now keep in mind, people have moved, right? But just to give you an example, 56 has been full. 71 full. Right, just to name a few. But I know without a shadow of a doubt that Kingdom 5 has only gained more people at this point, right? So they really should be full. Now, what we do know from a recent announcement that was posted and shared with us, that we shared in screenshots before, is that all of the kingdoms have basically gone down one whole migration activity status, or one kingdom activity status. So if they were full, they went from crowded. If they were crowded, they went to active. We know that to be the case because we showcased that off in a previous video. So you look at a kingdom like Kingdom 5, and they went from full to active, or crowded. And so if we click on Kingdom 5, you will see that this is Word in the War. This is one of the strongest alliances, if not could very well be the strongest alliance when we do the next top 25 alliance pool for the month of July, is that you see they have 244 spaces remaining, which means that they've brought in 56 people. Or I should say up to 56 people. Assuming that one person equals one space, that's why I say up to 56. The challenge here is that when we last looked at, and we can go in and look as well at the kingdom. So let's go. I actually just could have clicked on that. Oh, sorry, I don't want to apply. Cancel. Let's go, click go. So we're going to look at the kingdom real quick. I'm going to show you where the war is at the moment. And we'll just go here. I'll just click on the dragon, and we'll do New War. They are currently at almost 22.5 billion power. Right? Very well could be 23 billion by the time I do the next top 25 alliance. This is all for me to say that if this is accurate, what this means is that we are in a kind of bubble bursting moment, phase of Call of Dragons history, where we are very much seeing something that, even though it is not necessarily exact apple-to-apple comparison, for what we saw in RoK early on before the Imperium system and before migration restriction became a thing, for kingdoms like 1196, 1093, and others, it feels like that. Like just the environment, the essence, the ambiance, it very much feels similar, where we are now going to see some kind of boom. Now, whether you agree or you disagree with that, I just wanted to state that for the record so people have a little bit of historical reference. You understand how the system operated before today, or before recent changes, and then how it is looking now. Because it's one thing to kind of explain how something was, how it is, but when you can see the things for yourself, it really puts it into more perspective. And so now we get into this question of, well, how is this going to look for not only the other kingdoms that are in 1 through 90, but the newer kingdoms as well, right? When you think about kind of this idea of catch-up mechanics. I talked about this when I was covering the kind of milestone or just big, massive community suggestion document for Rise of Kingdoms, where we were reacting to that and going over some of the points they had in there. And the reason I say that is because I'm not necessarily against them increasing the cap, per se, when we talk about overall kingdom capacity. I just wish that they were more transparent about what is the kingdom capacity. Is it 1,000 players that you can have in there active? Is it a certain power threshold that you have in there before the kingdoms hit full status now? Will the spaces remaining be 300 for every single kingdom activity status going forward, which doesn't make any sense to me, because if you're a normal status kingdom, you should have more spaces available. If you're active, you should have more spaces available than crowded, right? So crowded should have the least amount of spaces available, active second most, and normal the most. That just makes sense. Why? Because that's how they've done it. That's how they started it. And guess what? It made sense when they did it that way. Now, you can argue and debate the numbers, if you will, but the fact is that we don't know what the threshold capacities are on the top end. We don't know. Like, to me, it would be great if there was some kind of data that we didn't have to manually pull, wink wink for myself, that would show us, okay, well, here's the total amount of active players in the kingdom, and then here's their punching power based on the total amount of active players, and then here's their punching power for their top 300, right? If you're just kind of taking summed total power. And if you're just only going off of power. Yes, we can use other metrics as well. But to kind of keep things simple for now, it'd be nice if there was something like that that was included in the game. Even if you look at a kingdom like 23 as an example. And so I look at 5, right? And 5 says, okay, application is required. Even though I meet everything, right, I have to apply. If I go here, it's migration is permitted at that point. And Right, maybe this could be other status, right? This is cannot migrate to this realm. This server has places remaining. This server has places remaining in its migration quota. That doesn't make any sense because they clearly do have places remaining. It says 300 over 300. So like stuff like that doesn't really make any sense to me when I'm looking through some of this. Even this 300 over 300, but it says I'm not meeting this requirement where it says this season has places remaining in its migration quota when clearly it does. So again, am I just misreading this somehow? That part doesn't really make sense to me. Where it says application required. I'm sorry. So the application required is if they set the, and so I understand that part. The application required is if they set the power to a lower amount than if they go up higher. However, I hope that this wouldn't eat away at a special immigration permit. Someone would have to let me know if they accept someone that's over the power limit that you set as a king or queen. Does it absorb or soak up a special immigration permit or not? Like, that would be interesting. Actually, I'm going to ask someone right now while we're doing this, and I'm just going to be curious to see if I get an answer before I kind of move on and talk about the next thing that I do want to touch on. Let's see here. Does accepting, let me write this out, does accepting a player over the migration power limit use a special immigration ticket? I'll just say, i.e., accepting a 25 mil player when power limit is set at 15. We'll do something like that, 15 mil. I'm sure they'll get back to me in a moment. But I at least just wanted to touch on that because to me that is somewhat interesting when we look at a number of these, at least when it says that we can't go in, right? Where it says cannot migrate to this server even though they're crowded. And even if I look at here, like this one's active, 35, why can I not migrate? Like, it's just, I don't know. I wish there was a little bit more explanation here. Some of that is a little bit confusing to me. But maybe, hopefully it's just a me thing, right? If other people are confused, I'd love to hear. But maybe it is just a me thing. And if that's the case, totally fine. Lastly, what I would love to touch on is, and I wonder if we got an answer back yet. No, not yet. I'll have to wait. The other thing that I wanted to touch on real quick is that where does this leave when we talk about the stability and population for kingdoms themselves? Like, where are we trying to get to? Because a lot of what we're seeing happening is this funneling effect of kingdoms that are mainly being one alliance servers and some being two alliance servers. And that's, on average, what we see occupies the majority of the space. However, when we look and we think about the Warband system in Call of Dragons, where you can have up to 4 alliances in a warband, you would like to believe this is there to help promote having more active alliances than a few, and kind of spreading out some of that wealth instead of consolidating into your top 1% for one alliance. And I look at this and I just wonder if it is eventually going to be about, well, let's just funnel everything into one alliance. And then at the same time, you're having people that are, I don't want to say complaining, but the feedback they're giving is based on them trying to fill out a single alliance versus trying to fill out activity in multiple alliances. You see where the differences are there. Because often, and this is what we saw with a number of alliances before they increased the cap to get more people in, prior to them doing the activity status adjustment. So this is like the second to most recent update that they did, where because people were not able to get others in for their friends, and keep in mind, this is because these kingdoms are already so strong. Like, you really have to understand that these are the creme de la creme, the top of the pile. And that's where, to me, it does make me wonder. Because the adjustments that are being made, if you were to look at kind of like middle of the pack kingdoms that are not the top and the high end there's a good chance they have a little bit more activity as far as total active players than some of the kingdoms or a number of them on the top end. And because of that, they probably have a higher percentage chance of having 2 active alliances more so than 1, maybe even sometimes 3. And it's just when I look at this kind of under a microscope and I just take a step back, I'm thinking, okay, well, a lot of these adjustments are being done because these kingdoms are like single alliance kingdoms. And they're just funneling all their power into the top 1%. And they're trying to bring in the strongest people that they can. Right? And so it makes me wonder, you know, is that the play? Or is it, okay, well, instead of bringing in this person who's 100 mil, let me bring in 4 people that are 25 mil. And maybe they'll power up or get to be eventually as strong. Or maybe I shouldn't say as strong, but they will be contributors. Right, to where instead of having 1 person, I can have 4, and maybe over a period of time, those 4 people will have better overall value, contributing value than the 1 person. Even if it still is close, maybe they'll edge that out over a period of time. Or maybe I'll bring in a few people that are lower power, but I know they're going to spend to power up, and now I have more active players compared to just to bringing in 1 person. It's just... It's such an interesting conversation to have when you think about how the kingdom capacities are, to a degree, being heavily influenced or factored based on this top 1% versus the kind of average Joes, right? Or what we would see that is not at the top 1%, right? For the other 99% of us, if you will. And like I said, it's not that I'm necessarily against them increasing the kingdom capacity, but my observations and skepticism come more from, are we using the appropriate sets of data? And are we looking at things objectively when we are making such changes to where we are really hoping that they're going to impact the game in a positive way down the road? And we're not just kind of being beholden to the moment of what is happening right now, right? Are we addressing a want or a need? And it just very much feels to me that we are addressing more of a want than a need. And I'm curious on what some of you think about that. Am I connecting with anyone? Am I totally off the rails here? Do some people get where I'm coming from? Not? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on this one. And so I say all, and again, I could talk about this for a while longer, but I think I'll probably, cut this short, is that And I said, and the last thing I'm going to say is I said this when I did my reaction video to the Rise of Kingdoms massive community suggestion sheet that they put together, that they had like 334 kingdoms that signed, over 880 players that signed it. They're going to be sending it off to Lilith, to the RoK team. And one of the things I touched on was when there was this suggestion issue or objective line about total population. And my view on this is pretty simple. I have said this for a number of times now, which is that I very much feel that the Augur Stone should be a heavy influence into into how kingdoms are populated and before new kingdoms arrive. And I say this because if we look at, for example, the first Augur Stone chapter, which is Faith Above All, right? It's 10,000 people. Lords must upgrade their cities to level 4 by the end of the countdown. As it pertains to how new kingdoms are populated, instead of, for example, just filling up kingdoms and say, okay, well, once we have 20, 30, 40,000 new accounts, whatever the number is, we'll wait for that to be hit, and then we'll open a new kingdom, which a number of people tend to feel that that is how things are. And maybe they use this Faith Above quest as a secondary factor. However, I very much am of the opinion that they should be using something like Faith Above All as the primary factor. Instead, however, the adjustment I would make here is that where we take this from being level 4 and we increase this to level 12. I say all of this because you have to think realistically about how long does it actually take for a brand new account to hit level 4. I could hit level 4 in less than 5 minutes if I really wanted to, without any helps and just using speed ups. If you are waiting for max helps, I would like to imagine that you could probably do this in less than 30 minutes. And I say all of this because do you think that someone who is playing the game for 30 minutes and has reached level 4 is more likely to play the game for a year, or someone that took a whole day to reach level 12, or a day and a half, however long it takes, is more likely to play for a year? I would argue that it's the person who had to spend more time in the game, therefore meaning that they are most likely enjoying the game longer because they've kept playing it to reach a higher level. And so for me, when I think about this, and I think about how do we address total population on both ends, one, where players are having higher levels of replayability, and so they're engaged longer, meaning that the retention is higher, and how do we decrease attrition and player drop-off? This, to me, is how you answer a lot of... I don't want to say you're going to answer it completely, but you're answering it from a number of ways on how you're approaching it from. Because what you're doing is you're now allowing for kingdoms to be more quality, to be denser or more dense, with a higher percentage chance of having quality players that are more likely to continue playing the game for a longer period of time versus not, or a lower percentage chance. And because if we get to that, just from tackling it from two of these ways that it can be tackled from, you're now going to have a higher percentage chance of ensuring that kingdoms have a higher quality batch of player base. And therefore also will be reducing the amount of dead kingdoms because the total population will be a higher average. Meaning that you will now be able to still have even higher levels of migration for movement, but also less dead kingdoms overall. And so again, I just wanted to kind of throw that in at the end. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. Now, whether that's level 12, I've argued that it could be anywhere from level 11 to 14. I think that's a nice starting point. I very much feel that it should be after whenever that early beginner migration, kind of misses, or whenever you get that thing where it's like, oh yeah, now you can't like change factions or something like that until a later stage, right? Which I think was somewhere around 11 or 12. But I'm okay with something like that, 11 to 14, 12 to 14, somewhere around there, I think would do it. However, what I'd like to be able to see the data on is, on average, for someone who's a free-to-play, who is only waiting to, who hasn't spent any money, and who's only waiting to use speed ups once they have received max helps, how long has it taken you to get to level 12, 13, and 14, or 11 through 14? Has it been a day, less than a day, more than a day? And I say all of this because I would almost say that if someone's actively playing for however many hours, or however many hours it takes, right? Like if you figure out how many hours it takes, I would argue that trying to figure something out where at minimum it's a day to 2 days worth of time that they're spending before a new kingdom comes out has a higher percentage chance of filling that up with a lot more quality density of players is better than kind of what is being done now, respectfully and objectively. That's going to do it for me now. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Until next time, I'll catch you later.